Hello there, and welcome to the Impact Zone podcast. We are back. I am back. You are here to listen to more TNA wrestling shenanigans here on the cast. So obviously today, by the title, we're having a look at Nick Nemeth's run in TNA, and perhaps it's not quite the right time to discuss his run quite yet because we don't know that it's over. But I think when people sort of go to look back on this run that Nick Nemeth has had in TNA, they will have to concede that this was his best run in wrestling. Period. Now, yes, I know that he did some other stuff in other promotions. He did some stuff in AAA. He did some stuff in New Japan. He did some other stuff here and there on the Indies, etc. Um, I don't want to discount any of that, certainly. And it does feel like it's very copy paste in some ways with a lot of the stuff that he did in terms of AAA, New Japan, and TNA, especially because he won major championships there in all of those promotions and put somebody over. I haven't really watched, and that's the problem. Um, you can try to do these things. You can try to bring in major stars for some of these more smaller shows or what have you. Um, some people consider TNA a smaller show. Certainly, I can, find space to agree. Um, it is smaller than AEW or WWE currently. Um, I don't think it's on the level of indies at the moment, certainly. Maybe a year or two ago, it was sort of on that level of being in the indie realm. But then again, you've got to kind of factor in the fact that they actually have, you know, pay per views that sell way more. They have TV that gets, you know, actual numbers and that in comparison to not having TV or maybe having TV for a few weeks or a few months or whatever it is in the year. They're, even though it's taped, it's, 52 weeks out of the year, even though, some of those are, the recap episodes or whatever else it is. Yes, you still have that sort of stuff, but still, like every week for the full year, you can't complain. And those are still, new-ish episodes, I guess. And like, are people going to be watching during the holiday break? Probably not, So having something else, that's just sort of, oh, here's some awards for some people, and here's some, matches of, this sort of thing. Like, I think we talked about like replaying matches from pay-per-views or whatever else it is. As I say, I think highlights are fine, but when it's the end of the year awards, I think that's different. I think you can replay um, matches. Now, of course, again, it's still somewhat highlights um, in some regard, but it is more of the full match um, than, you know, than just like a few, little highlights or whatever else it is. Um, but yes, certainly you look at Nick Nemeth's run in TNA, it's got to be praised for what it was. It was the best run that he's had because he was featured as a main player. Um, and that's something that TNA can offer. Like, again, we've talked about this whole thing, the situation with a bunch of people leaving. Um, And, that's opened up a lot of money in some ways. Yes, I know the Hardys and a few other people are probably um, have big contracts as well, but still, um, you've got to look at, well, Josh Alexander. I'm sure he wasn't not making $0. Surely he was making some decent money there, um, and whatnot. So, and same with Jordan Grace. I'm sure she was making very good money there, um, in terms of the deals that TNA was offering. Um, and I don't know what PCO was kind of on. I know that he must have been on some sort of deal, So and I think there's a few other people that have kind of flitted in and out, like Khan and a few other people that have kind of been there, and or maybe they were all like, I don't know, maybe they were on a handshake agreement, maybe they came in for a few weeks or a few months or whatever it was, and said, okay, well, like, let's see where our relationship goes. Let's see how we, kind of go from here. Um, that sort of thing. Like, I think it's, and maybe, like, again, maybe Joe Doring or somebody like that that's been on the outs for a long time. Chris Bay, some of these other people that have been injured for a while. Kylan King. Now you've got, like, Steph Delander, though I think Steph's potentially coming back sooner rather than later. Thinking Kylan King's coming back soon, hopefully, as well. Um, we know now that Bay was paralyzed and whatnot. And hopefully he'll be back too. But again, the company found a way, and found that way mainly through Nick Nemeth. Because again, like, not that the undercard or whatever else doesn't do anything to draw people in, but it is those major things that do draw people in the most. Again, having Nick Nemeth there and having him be in a significant role, and being the champion for, I think it was good 6 months there, or roughly thereabouts. You know, and not just doing that, he was having, like, absolute great matches with everyone, top to bottom, for the last, like, year or more now it is, that he's been there. And we will have to keep, our eye on his situation as to when he's actually, maybe potentially leaving or winding down or whatever else it is. We don't know. Maybe he will be um, um, TNA's next Kurt Angle in some ways, where he's, sticks around for quite a while, for, a fair while, and then sort of wanders off to do whatever. It's up to him, obviously, and I don't know what he wants. I think he wants to wrestle as long as what he can. A lot of people kind of want that, and he's certainly athletic and skilled enough, and able enough, and whatever else, and to do that. He doesn't look like he's slowed down too much. He doesn't look like too clunky in the ring or whatever else, like a few people have looked here and there and whatnot. But look, we looked at some of the stuff that Matt and Jeff are doing now, and they look better than ever. Like, really, like, they've stepped up their game, and we're able to get back to some of their better form. So it just takes that, that training and whatever, DDP yoga, I don't know what they're doing again. But same thing for Nemeth. Like, that's one of the core things that you do and have to do. Like, if you're going to, be out there, you've got to be able to perform at the highest level. And, he's performed at the highest level there, and perform with a lot of the top wrestlers, and made a lot of dream matches, but not just dream matches. A lot of those matches were actually, things that were built up towards, and in a story, not just, here's a random match. It'll be somebody's dream match or a good, really good match or whatever else it is, but it doesn't really have anything behind it. If you actually have those things behind it, it makes those things a lot more. But yes, I think, as I said, it's not over yet, and he's already had like one of the best years that he's had in professional wrestling. I mean, you can't get much better. Like, I mean, maybe if he does go back to WWE and they decide, oh yes, we're gonna do some big things with you, maybe. Like, he did have a pretty decent run in NXT from what I have been told, um, and whatnot. But it's difficult to contrast being on somebody's like C show or third show or whatever else it is, and being on the maybe the third biggest wrestling promotion in the US's main show, like. But I just think it made more waves. I think it made more headlines. I think more people are much more aware. Like, even if you ask people about his NXT run, some people might know about it, or some people might have something somewhat positive to say about it, or whatever. But I do think that most people would be like, he had an NXT run, and he actually won the NXT title. What? Like, they probably wouldn't even know about it. Again, it wasn't very like newsworthy in some regards, unfortunately. And I think it was fairly short from my knowledge, and I think it was like in that 2.0 era, roughly. And I think a lot was kind of going on in that era of things, and it's sort of like he was like already the guy that a lot of people, when they went to the main roster, that he'd be one of the first people that people would have a match or a rivalry against, and he'd just job to them to, get them on the rolling path towards, being in the main roster. And then he was sort of brought down to NXT, and I think this was when. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, it must have been because it was the 2.0 era. I think this is when Vince was still in charge of it. And yeah, he won the title and did some stuff, but he was mainly there to, work with people that were going to go to the main roster, or people that Vince thought were perhaps going to go to the main roster or whatever it was. Again, I think this we start talking about the potential in the future, and honestly, I do feel like they should WWE should push more of the people that they aren't using into NXT, because it's like, give them something to do. Give a few of these younger people that are in NXT these other people to work with. And it sucks because, again, it's like, well, then you're sort of taking all these people that actually have something to work with, or you think have something bigger to be on the main rosters, and it's like, well, eventually some of them have got to kind of fall by the wayside in some ways, because you can't like do something with everyone. It's just not feasibly possible. And not everyone can win, but again, it's just one of those things. It does feel like some people are very forgotten about there, but it's the same here. Even saying so, even with a much smaller roster, and whatnot, and even with people leaving, I still feel like there is that air of, I don't know, uh, how is the roster going to go after Jordan? I mean, again, I think people will worry too much about that in some ways, because like they've had people leave before. Lots of people leave before. Um, you know, that's the thing. And maybe the roster hasn't been this thin in a while. But that's the chance to rebuild it, you know. And again, I know people are going to hate on the whole bringing in Tessa thing, but again, it's like, well, there's a lot of star power there. So bringing in that person to be like, yeah, I'm going to be here and I'm going to do the work and I'm going to, you know, put in the effort and I'm going to try to make, you know, a lot of the people here look good, you know, or help them grow and develop as well. But I'm also just here for myself for that redemption or for whatever else it is, you know, freaking fair enough, you know, in some ways. And they've taken another big gamble there in that, in some ways. And it's great, again, like, we were talking, I think, about the whole PCO exit, PCO's controversy in that, where he was sort of saying, you know, I was the one that got TNA the biggest gate. That's very, very debatable, to say the least. Like, certainly he helped because he did a lot of local promotion, and he did a lot of local French promotion, and he's a big star in the area that he is, that he's from over there in Canada, in Quebec. I'm not sure exactly like his main area, but of course it's like all that, yeah, sort of area anyway. Um, but no, I feel like, you know, there's certainly other people, Nick Nemeth, the Hardys, Joe Hendry, Jordan Grace, like a lot of people contributed to um, to the build, Mustafa Ali, to that gate, to that, you know, crowd. And again, it's not the biggest crowd that they've had. Like even last year, wasn't the biggest crowd, wasn't the biggest gate. So you can't claim you can't claim all these things. But again, it's just like, you know, uh, you certainly have some sense of saying, well, I helped in that. Yes, certainly, you know, and Nick Nemeth helped in that. And I think the momentum, the positive momentum that they kind of had in the working relationship with NXT or WWE, even though it was sort of tentative and like that's maybe like one of those things, because I've said here and there that I don't really think much of the relationship thus far. I guess people are buying into the potential. Like, people are sitting there and going, oh, what about this or what about that? Or, you know, here's like a bunch of things that we kind of want to see, you know, with this relationship. You know, it's like, I don't know. It's interesting to see like how much people's investment is, despite, you know, the perhaps lackluster, in a sense, sort of thing of having very sort of more minor people appearing from NXT at least, you know, um, and it still does feel like, well, you know, maybe even so, you know, has that led to good things? Well, yeah, in a lot of ways it has. So, you know, and has that also secured, you know, some of these TV deals? And I don't know, maybe it has, because again, like any positive momentum or anything that gives somebody the impetus to say, well, you know, let's see what we can do with this, let's give it a go. And, you know, we're signing up for quite a while here, but that's at least a decent period of time to see, you know, what we're going to get out of this, you know, relationship. You know, is it going to be good for us? You know, or is the you know is are we already doing decent enough numbers that it's like, well, this is just something to add to the the list of content that we sort of have on our network, you know. Um, and I think that that's perhaps where perhaps that Sportsnet deal sort of fell into. It was sort of like, well, we need something to replace WWE, um, because we're not going to have WWE anymore. So it is very much like, what are we going to do without that? And yeah, having that backup or having something else, like, of course, again, like I say, you could take AEW, but you can see that, like, unfortunately, and I don't want to badmouth them or anything like that, but they're on the downcline, and maybe TNA, they might not be doing as well of numbers as what AEW is even in their downcline, but they're on sort of an upswing. They've had a bunch of, venues sell out. And again, they're on absolutely pitiful numbers as far as their TV distribution goes. But they've made it work because of their street teams, because of the local promotion, uh, and just like the general internet buzz that they're kind of getting, from this working relationship or from some of this sort of stuff, once you start that ball rolling of positive momentum, people sort of start, sort of latching onto that as well. They start going, oh, TNA is doing really, like, did a really good show for them. Maybe things are starting to look out positive. Maybe we'll go to their show, Or there's that level of interest, like, oh shit, TNA's back, or whatever else it is. And again, don't discount that branding, like, and like, don't discount the idea of going, well, what could happen? Like, maybe we should give it a go, check it out, like, because this is a new era, this is something else, this is, whatever it is. We have to keep doing these things, and like, again, like Dolph or Nick, um, he's had a resurgence, much like Christian Cage coming to TNA, even though Christian never really won many major belts before coming to TNA. He did with the IC and whatnot, some other mid-card titles and even the tag titles, but you look at what he did and what he didn't do. He really became a top guy in TNA because they believed in him and they said, right, well, let's give you the ball and see what we can do with it and run with it. And again, that positive momentum, that that thing that they did. And again, the same thing with Raven many years ago when he first joined TNA. Even though that he'd been effectively relegated to WWE jobber status, he came in with momentum because people knew, hey, he's much more talented than that. And TNA decided, you know what, we're going to put him basically at the top of our roster. He didn't win the title for a while, but again, he was in a lot of those main events, and he was a part of a lot of big things. And eventually they came to put the belt on him, and whatnot, But even saying after that, he was still treated like one of the major guys, Same with Christian. Even like after he was no longer champion, he was in that main event scene quite a lot with Kurt Angle and Samoa Joe and others, because he was that level of player. They saw him as that level of player, and he was getting, a lot of momentum on their side at that time. And yeah, certainly Kurt was too. But again, having had some of these guys that perhaps had kind of done stuff in WWE, but hadn't really reached their full potential. Rob Van Dam, even though I don't agree with exactly how it was done, I think, he didn't really reach that full potential in WWE. TNA said, hold our beer, effectively. Um, let us have a go. Um, Sting, I don't know, because it's like, he had his WWE run after. You could compare it to his WCW run or his later WCW run. I still don't think they really did know what they were doing with Sting in WCW, whereas, though some people will um, say he was too much in at the top here and there or whatever, and I can agree at some points or whatever, but again, sometimes things happened, and that whole situation with Jeff Hardy and whatnot. So they had to put the belt on somebody, or maybe just vacate it. I don't know. Um, that sort of thing has to happen. Unfortunately, they had to get the belt off Jeff. You know, Sting was the opponent, so, and they didn't have like anyone for Feast or Fight at the time, so, you know, or anything else like that. So it was like, well, what are we going to do? And a snap decision had to be made. So, and then they have to change their entire path of what they were going to do and how they were going to do it. After that, because they had probably planned for Jeff just to be the champ. Um, you know, um, you can think of a few other people like Lashley. Like, Lashley did amazing work in TNA, like, because he was allowed that time and that space and kind of the ability to fail at certain points when, you know, he wasn't overly pushed. They let him grow naturally, which is what, a superstar kind of needs. They need to just figure it out for themselves and find that way to connect. And sometimes it does take a certain combination of having this and having that and having, MVP there and whatever else. Of course, some people have come through TNA, like Xavier Woods and actually MVP, funnily enough. And like some people were there for a cup of coffee, like Dean Ambrose and El Generico, and a lot of other people, Johnny Gargano, um, Mickey James, even. Like a lot of people like had a small run in TNA before going to WWE, or even just in for a cup of coffee or whatever it was. But again, they appeared and they did stuff, and that might have, said, hey, to WWE, maybe we should try to pick this guy up before TNA signs them or whatever it is. you know um, they're a free agent. They're giving them a chance and saying, hey, you could come to our show and without a contract, and we'll work on a handshake, and we'll showcase you and give you, some exposure or whatever. And if you decide to sign with us, you decide to sign with us, but maybe WWE come and pick you up, you know. So it was a launching point for some of those people, including Tyler Black, aka Seth Rollins, like it's funny and CM Punk, like years ago, like it's funny, like all these people that like Drew Galloway, he came through TNA on his road back to WWE, um, Eli Drake, LA Knight, he was a TNA prospect way back, um, a lot of people that have gone to WWE have gone through the doors. They've crossed the line, so to speak. Nick Nemeth's crossed the line, and he's done some great stuff, and hopefully for more stuff, because it's certainly at a point where it's you start saying, well, what's the point of diminishing returns, so to speak? And we haven't reached that point yet, but you've got to always keep your eye out for that point. I think they were kind of at that point with PCO, especially since they didn't really do anything with him, and especially since they kind of were letting his contract lapse, and it was like, well, we haven't got the belt off of him. You really should have thought ahead and thought, let's take the belt off of you before, your contract runs out, because that's like having somebody on a handshake. Yes, a lot of people um, honor that and whatnot. And Nick Nemeth honored his handshake agreement that he was on, and I think he's now on a proper um, contract of sorts. I think, um, but again, how long's that for? Probably 6 months to a year at least. Um, they wouldn't sign something, just for a few months or whatever it was, just to be like, oh yeah, you're under our contract. But in that vein, they might have said, you know, hey, you can work with, the Indies and whatever else, if and New Japan and AAA and whatnot, if you want. And hey, well, we've got this deal with WWE, so maybe you can work with them too, and or work with some NXT people. You know, that might be something that might pop up. I don't know. Like, I don't see how you kind of work that in for him right now, right here, with the circumstances that are ahead of us, um, or at least the circumstances that I think are ahead of him, which is mostly a feud with his brother. Um, but then again, I could be wrong. He could join up with Ryan. We don't know. We'll wait and see again, because again, it's not over until the fat lady sings, so to speak. But again, you've got to look on his run thus far over this year as being positive, and as being like, yeah, his best run thus far. And I can consider to say that the next year, or however long that he's going to be there, is going to be probably not as good, but still it's going to be um, worth something, I think. And people will like mostly remember probably his title run, but I think people will still talk about him doing some good work here and there, and whatnot, and some good character stuff, and some good matches and whatnot as well, throughout. So but yeah, I think that's where we're at with Nick right now. We'll have to check in maybe in another year. I don't know. We'll wait and see. He might be gone in 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is. Who knows? But again, or they might not have anything to do with him for for a few months or whatever it is, and he might go to WWE and do some stuff on NXT. Depends what they've got for him, you know. But that is in the future. And in our future is more content coming your way, guys. So I hope you did enjoy this one, and I hope you will join me again in another one.